Joining us now, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Secretary, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me on.
So you are out now as part of the re-election bid for President Trump, or excuse me, President Biden. You would not be out there for President Trump. President Biden for a second term. The border keeps showing up at the top of the concerns of Americans out there. So let's start there. It's no secret this administration from the beginning said it would get rid of policies they thought were cruel or potentially illegal under President Trump. Here is Secretary Mayorkas. This is 2021.
So we have rescinded so many Trump immigration policies, it would take so much time to list them.
So since then, there have been dozens and dozens of actions from the previous administration that have been done away with, things like ending border wall funding, ending executive orders that would have prioritized people for deportation, all kinds of things that the administration embraces. These aren't hidden actions. But we're now at double or triple the numbers we were seeing under the Trump administration. Does this president not own the numbers at the border, the chaos there?
Well, this president has taken leadership in addressing the situation of the border and has demonstrated by supporting a bipartisan border bill that would send resources to help deal with that issue. And I emphasis on the word bipartisan because even though President Biden was backing that bill, it was negotiated by one of the most conservative Republicans in the Senate, Democrats across the table. They got to a deal that was workable. The bases of both parties didn't love it, but most Americans would agree it would help, only for congressional Republicans to kill that compromise, apparently at the behest of former President Trump. And I think that shows you the difference between rhetoric and action. Right now, we have an opportunity to pass a bill to get the resources to help with the border, which everybody agrees is a problem. And yet, you have this intervention to prevent Congress from acting. It makes you wonder whether there aren't some, like congressional Republicans, who would rather have the problem get worse so they can attack the president over it, then reach across the aisle and work with the president to do something about it.
But let's talk about the 3 years leading up to this, because there's no mistaking just factually through nonpartisan agencies that the numbers have spiked to record high levels. Things like this administration saying we're not going to give notice to appear, so somebody has to show up in immigration court. We're going to give notice to report, where some 50% of people apparently do not show up and self-report to ICE. We have millions of people into this country. We have growing numbers of people on terror watch list. We don't know who's here. I mean, that happened for 3 years before we got to this potential deal in the Senate.
Let me remind you that the president proposed comprehensive immigration reform on day one of his administration in 2021. There are a lot of factors that have contributed to the issues at the border. Those include economic issues, safety issues happening in Central America. But what we know is when there was actually a chance to do something about it, actually a hard-won agreement between conservative Republicans and Democrats on what to do, we almost got there, only for the former president, who's not even an elected official, to pull the rug out from under us by intervening and telling the Speaker and congressional Republicans to kill that bipartisan border deal.
But do you dispute that the 3 years of chaos leading up to that bill is the result of some of those actions? Because the House Republicans will say, we gave you H.R. 2. The president gave us something on day one that he knew wouldn't pass. Some would argue H.R. 2 coming from the House was so strident that wouldn't pass. And then we have 3 years of increasing numbers that nobody disputes were actually happening.
Yeah, so President Biden did away with some policies that he believed were illegal or immoral, such as separating families at the border, retained others in a way that, not everybody in his political base loved, but he believed were necessary to keep this country safe. But again, the question, we can do a Washington blame game all day, and you can tell there's some folks in the Capitol who would rather do that than roll up their sleeves and solve the problem. But anybody who opens their mouth about this issue should first have to explain, any politician should first have to explain why they stood in the way of a border bill that could be passed tomorrow and the president would sign it.
Should he take executive action knowing that's not going to happen?
Well, he's taking executive action right now and will continually reassess what needs to be done based on the law and based on facts on the ground.
Would he reinstate Remain in Mexico, which a lot of folks say that's responsible for millions of people who get here, check a box. You hear Border Patrol agents complaining, we're not even law enforcement officers anymore. We are facilitating people's entry into this country, letting them go and not knowing where they will ever turn up again.
Which is why Congress should listen to the president and send more resources there, both to adjudicate the cases for those who are involved in that side and to get the technology and the personnel. Remember, the Border Patrol Union not exactly big fans of President Biden, endorsed this border bill, and yet congressional Republicans killed it. So again, we can continue to indulge in a Washington blame game or actually get something done. And I would add, this is in context of so many areas where there's been talk for years, talk, and no action. President Biden has taken action. He took action to finally let Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices over the objection of Big Pharma and congressional Republicans. He took action to make sure that we have a stronger economy, which is why more jobs have been created on his watch than any president in American history. He took action to pass an infrastructure bill where the prior president, the former president, promised it every year, failed to get it done. So we can talk about language, we can talk about words, or we can talk about action.
All right, let's talk about the economy, because when you talk about the fact that he created jobs, there have been a number of fact checks on this by plenty of different organizations, and they'll say that more than 70% of the jobs that he says were created were actually rebound jobs that came back from the 22 million we lost in COVID. And so you got to factor that into the conversation. When it comes to how people are actually feeling about how they're doing, though, the AP looked at this, looked at prices, talked about where we are, food and gas, and all of these things that are up. Many people have depleted their savings over the last couple of years of inflation. Credit card debt is at an all-time high, well over $1 trillion. But they note not everything can go on a credit card. They say this: median rent for a property with up to 2 bedrooms has jumped from more than $1,400 at the end of 2020 to more than $1,700 at the end of the year, according to Realtor.com. So you've got the higher gas prices, the higher food prices, rent more than $300 a month. That's thousands of dollars a year. We asked people, do you have more money in your pocket versus last year? 57% of people told us they have less. They tell us they're not doing well. Their families aren't doing well. So looking at the data, looking at people's personal experience, are you telling these Americans they're wrong about their own personal financial situation?
So there's a lot of things in that question, so I'll try to take them in order. First of all, the idea of how the economy rebounded from COVID. Let me be clear. Unemployment is lower than it was even before COVID. Stock market is higher than it was even before COVID, and job creation is faster than it was even before COVID. So no matter what rebound effects you're talking about, these are economic results that have not happened since before I was born. Now, in terms of cost, that's been a major issue. And by the way, that's been a major issue in every wealthy country. This is an example of something that was largely affected by COVID. But I think there's a reason why inflation in the U.S. is lower than it is in any of the other G7 countries.
It's actually not true.
Yes,
at least, well, not according to the Washington Post. They say Japan, Italy, and Germany all had lower inflation rates than we do, and Italy's is less than 1%.
They may have been looking at a different time period, but I'm telling you, if you look at the overall time period when it was toughest, our inflation rate was better. And I would add, right now, wages are going up faster than prices. That means even after inflation, you're coming out ahead. Now, that's an across-the-board number, but some people...
For 2 years, that wasn't true.
We had a tough bout of inflation, no doubt that we did, which is why
back.
President Biden is trying to lower costs. Now, look, congressional Republicans were against President Biden when he worked to cut insulin down to $35 a month for seniors. Right now, especially for families that are pressed on costs, we could have insulin capped at $35 a month for everybody, not just for seniors. All it would take is for a few congressional Republicans to walk away from agreeing with Big Pharma and start agreeing with President Biden. That's not the only cost he's out to cut. He was in the House in that State of the Union speech calling for an across-the-board $2,000 out-of-pocket cap, something else that would help in a country where people are feeling the pinch of those prices that went up with post-COVID inflation. Congressional Republicans are standing in the way of it, but he's going to keep pushing. He's trying to get rid of junk fees, taking on credit card companies, because we know that those are something that affects the cost of living. And look, something else that comes into play alongside the cost of housing is the cost of transportation, which is why, after years and years of talk and years of failure, President Biden successfully began to implement the infrastructure bill that is now creating jobs, boosting income, and lowering the cost of our supply chains in every part of the country.
Well, there are a lot. We didn't even get to your day job, because there's a lot going on in the world of transportation too. You did, but I would say this: as we have, engines catching on fire, doors falling off, wheels falling off, people are very concerned about traveling. How do you reassure them? Because now we're being told by some that Boeing is not cooperating with the investigation into what happened in that Alaska Airlines flight. How can you reassure people that they should get on a plane?
First of all, Boeing needs to cooperate in every respect, and the FAA has given them 90 days to show a comprehensive plan on how they're going to turn their quality issues around. Every time I step off of a jet bridge and onto a plane, which is every few days, I know that I am participating in the safest way to travel in the world, and we never take that for granted. I mean, if you just think about it, It's an amazing fact, right, that a form of transportation that involves being sent through the air at nearly the speed of sound in a metal tube is the safest way to travel in America. If we want to maintain that, as we must, that means an enormous amount of rigor in dealing with Boeing, in dealing with any regulatory issue. And that's exactly what FAA is doing. What we also need to do, by the way, and this never gets coverage, we also need to take that same level of rigor that has made it possible for there to be 3 billion people safely getting on and off airplanes just since Joe Biden took office, and apply it to roadway safety, where we lose about as many Americans as can fill a 737 every single day. We could do something about that, and we should.
Well, that is your job. We're glad that you stopped in to talk to us about all the things that you're doing, Secretary. Good to see you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.